Hey everyone, and welcome back to the AI in Action podcast. I'm your host, Mazor, Kario, product design and AI expert, and the creator of an online leaders program, Unlocking the Power of Generative AI. And today we're exploring the fascinating world of AI-driven user research and the impact on it's having on product development. Joining us is Natan Voitenkov, a leading AI entrepreneur who is revolutionizing the way companies understand their customers. We'll be discussing the possibilities of using AI to gather insights, build better products, and navigate the challenges of being an AI entrepreneur. Get ready for a thought-provoking conversation. Hey, I want to welcome Natan Voitenkov. How are you?
Hey Adi, doing great. Thank you for having me.
I'm so happy that you're here. Natan is the CEO and co-founder of Genway, and we're going to have a fascinating talk. So now we can start. So what inspired you to dive into the world of AI and user research, and what are you passionate about in this space?
It's a very good question, Adi. And I would say if you were to ask me that question 5-6 years ago, I was neither passionate about AI for obvious reasons, neither about user research. What I am, however, passionate about and was always passionate about is the power of feedback. I was always taught that feedback is a gift. And during the 5 years that I used to work at Google, across Google Ireland and Google Israel, it was something that was very much engraved into the DNA of the company and the employees, providing feedback and getting feedback. And during those 5 years, I realized that I find it more challenging to give feedback than to receive feedback. When you're sitting on the other side of that table and you provide feedback to the person, I was constantly thinking about how is that feedback going to be perceived? Will the person get offended from what I'm saying? Will he understand what I'm saying? And so a couple of years ago, when we were going through the AI revolution, when it just began, I realized that there is an opportunity there to use AI in order to scale the way users provide feedback. And that's kind of ultimately led to building Genway and what we're doing today. And we will talk more about it in details. Extremely excited about what we can do with conversational AI and how that can help us scale products and build better products for users.
Yeah. I think that what you're saying, we see in many cases in surveys when people are asked, they're like a bit sugarcoating their answers. They're not answering exactly. It depends on who's asking the question. What do they think is expected of them to say? You see it in many cases. Then the answers are not really clean in that aspect.
I completely agree. And I would add on top of that kind of in user research, when we think about research in general, we usually think about qual and quant, qualitative research and quantitative research. Each of them has its benefits and its limitations. And when it comes to surveys, traditionally, we're thinking about surveys as thin data and interviews as thick data. Very insightful and very deep. But obviously, each of those disciplines has its own biases and its own approaches to how we can mitigate those biases. When it comes to getting feedback through an actual interview, one-to-one interview with another person, over there, the one thing that we cannot mitigate against is the other side's kind of perspective. So when I know that we are conducting this conversation, when I know that I'm proactively sharing feedback with you, despite your best efforts, I would always think about how are you understanding what I'm saying? Will that offend you? Would that kind of make you think differently about me? And so that's something that you cannot mitigate against in a one-to-one conversation, but AI has the potential to change that.
Yeah, and more than that, one of the reasons that qualitative research is done in lower numbers because it consumes lots of time from the researchers. Had we done it in a different way or with using some kind of technology, I guess we could have done more of that. And that would give us both the quality and the quantity of the data if we wanted.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. I think that you're touching on a very interesting point. And in the bigger scheme of things, when we think about research and when we think about how it has been done over the last 2 decades, we haven't seen a fundamental change in the way user research is being conducted over the last 2 decades. Yes, we have seen a whole bunch of tools that allow us to maybe be more effective and analyze data much faster, but we haven't seen a fundamental change in how we understand our users. It's important to understand that during the dot-com kind of a bubble, there were a bunch of platforms that were created in the field of research. Companies such as User Testing and User Zoom, just to name a few of them. And those companies were there to help companies from the physical world move into the digital world and help them source participants to conduct interviews. But fundamentally, we're still doing research in the exact same way. We will conduct 8, 10, or 15 interviews, and based on that, we will be making strategic decisions. It's very common to come across the rule of 5. That basically means that if you interview 5 users, you will come across 75% of usability issues. The problem with that is that 20 years ago, we used to have one very straightforward funnel through which all of the users will go. Those days, we have hundreds of different user segments and thousands of different funnels. So good luck trying to kind of nail it all with 5 users.
Yeah, and I think the systems are different too. The types of users and how much they are knowing about the system. Maybe they're experts, maybe the newcomers, maybe these users is not using their mother tongue language in the system, so forth. There are many types of users. When we conduct user research, we usually seek for something which is a very deep insight of what people are doing, and that probably will come from a very deep interview. Usability testing is something that you just see the results. You hardly talk to people and you could see from the results, is it working or not? But usually the systems are very well designed these days, and only in very, I think, like seldom that I see it is seldom in my use cases that people don't understand anything, like what's going on. We don't understand where we are. In most cases, they would have something which has a bit of like a deep meaning for the usability and for the product itself, maybe a feature that is missing or misunderstood.
I would say that I can agree with most of that. When it comes to usability, there's still a lot of challenges that companies are facing with, especially B2B companies. The larger the company is, the more funnels it has within kind of the product, the more segments it has, and the more sub-products it has. And so it's actually a very interesting topic. Just a few days ago, I was chatting to a friend about how damn difficult it is those days getting an invoice from one of the software providers that you're using. 5 years ago, you go into the settings and there is a very clear indication of where you get the invoice. Today, you go into the settings and then first of all, you need to figure out how to get to the settings tab. And then from the settings, you have to figure out which of the subcategories is actually going to lead you to the invoicing part. And then from the invoicing part, some of those companies, it's not even a straightforward process of downloading the invoice. You actually have to request that invoice. And so when we think about user interviews, that's a very big name and it has many subcategories beneath it. One of those categories is product feedback interviews. Another category is usability studies. Another one is prototype testing. And that's only to name a few of those. And the larger the organization is, the more mature its research discipline is going to be, and the more stakeholders there will be involved in the research process. A couple of years ago, Google even coined the term insights generating functions in order to indicate that user research does no longer live in a silo, so to speak. You have product managers conducting user research. You have growth teams conducting user research. You have designers conducting user research. And of course, best-in-class companies would also have dedicated customer experience teams conducting user research. And so when we think about it, fundamentally, companies might claim that they're special and that one company is different from the other, but in reality, the only thing that sets two companies apart is how customer-centric they are. Meaning how well they understand their customers and are able to cater to the needs of those customers. And so those small things that we might consider small, like a usability issue, that would be called maybe a paper cut for some people, but for others it would be a flesh wound in a sense that if I'm not able to get access to my invoice easily, it's annoying for me and I will just move to a different vendor where I can easily streamline the process of getting that invoice and uploading it into my accounting software.
Yeah, makes sense. So how do you see AI changing the landscape of user research in the future? And what are some of the most promising trends as you see it?
Yeah, so this is something that we have been spending a lot of time thinking about and discussing with other leaders in the UX research discipline. And I would say that the three kind of fundamental changes that I see AI bringing into the UX discipline are first, the merge of qual and quant research. Traditionally, qual and quant were two stand kind of alone disciplines that did not come together. So you could either do research at scale and then you will get thin insights, or you could do very limited research and then you will get thick insights. With AI, we have the opportunity to merge those two disciplines together and get qualitative insights at a quantitative scale. The second fundamental change that we see is UX research becoming accessible for everyone. When you look across the board, you see that it's best in class software companies or CPG companies or retail companies that adopted UX research because they have the capital for that. Smaller kind of SMBs or growth stage companies will not necessarily have a dedicated research discipline because it's pretty expensive. So when we look at the US, if you want to hire a dedicated researcher and he has a few years of experience, you're looking at $120,000 to $150,000 a year, and that's a big expense. And so with AI, I believe that solutions such as Genway and others would enable smaller companies to start utilizing UX research. That's kind of the second thing. And the third thing, I believe that AI is actually going to unlock new demographics for research. So when we think about it, there is bias in everything, right? There is bias in people that choose to answer a survey. There is a certain bias in people that choose to jump on an interview. When we think about the online review industry, 9 out of 10 reviews are written because the customer is upset, and so he decides to write about it. So there is bias to everything.
Sure.
Now, what we have found out is that people feel more comfortable talking, a certain segment of users, people, feel more comfortable talking to an AI agent for whatever reason it is, and there are a few of those. So utilizing AI is also going to unlock new segments that companies can use in order to build more inclusive products and kind of have a more comprehensive understanding of their customer base.
Yeah.
So I would say those three are kind of the big tectonical changes that I see happening due to AI. And the one I'm most definitely excited the most about is UX research becoming accessible for smaller organizations, smaller teams, smaller companies for a more limited budget.
Yeah, that makes sense. You know, when you're talking about qualitative and quantitative data, we had a guest from a startup called Blink. And what they're doing is the opposite of what Genway is doing. So they're taking surveys data. And usually in surveys, you have like questions that you just need to mark what is the right answer for you. And when you have free text, most people, if it's done in thousands of customers like we have in surveys, it's very hard to derive any kind of insights from the free text. So they could give you very deep insights on the data, which is written in free text. And while in Genway, you are taking the other part, which is taking user interviews and making it more qualitative and quantitative, meaning I could do it in mass way and just get more and more insights using AI in order to interview these users and customers and get insights in mass scale.
Yeah, I think so. I actually don't think that we touched upon that. But when we think about Genway, right? So what are we actually building? We are building an AI-powered platform for user research, meaning you or anyone else, non-technical personas, are able to use the platform in order to create an AI agent, meaning an AI interviewer that is capable of conducting in-depth conversations with your customers or with your users and derive insights out of those. And when I say in-depth conversations, we're talking about a video-based interview, which is done using voice communication. And on the one hand, on one side, you have the customer or the user. And on the other side, you have the AI agent that is capable of doubling down on the nuances of the conversation and kind of leading that conversation in the direction that the product manager or the UX researcher defined.
Yeah, and you could share a screen with this AI agent and see the features and talk about the product and so forth while doing the conversation.
Yeah, that's correct. So when we started the company roughly a year and a bit ago, we were only supporting contextual interviews. So those would not include any visuals, whether it's a video or a picture or a prototype. Today, we have contextual interviews and we have usability studies. And both of those are available in a dozen languages, which allows organizations to actually expand their research discipline beyond the native languages, so to speak. So if you're a US-based team and you're working across the board, most likely most of your team would be positioned in the US and they would probably talk maybe 2, 3, 4 languages. So the coverage is very limited.
Yeah, and we have big organizations and products which are international. They have customers from all around the world, and it's very hard to find user research teams all around the world in order to do and conduct all of these researches. And usually they just select the bigger markets. In most cases, this is the decision for international companies. They say, okay, most of our users are from US, Canada, and maybe England. We'll go there. And that's it, more or less. This is what they're doing usually.
Most often, indeed. I would say that kind of one of the barriers within the discipline is the high cost associated with research. And so if I'm a US-based company and Japan is one of my markets or Germany is one of my target markets, in order to conduct a comprehensive study or a comprehensive research in that market, I would either fly my team over there and have some translators available to help with the communication, or I will hire a local agency to assist me with the research. Both of those options are extremely expensive.
Yeah. And more than that, this is when you have a product and you want to conduct a user research for your existing product. If we're thinking about a new idea that you have and you want to have some kind of validation for the demo or for the initial MVP, and you want to try and think what is the right market, where it should go, for sure you need the capacity to search for the right market, to search for the right users. And then, especially when you're just a small startup with an MVP, it's even much harder, I guess.
It's actually a very interesting point. So when we started the company a year ago, we thought that it's only the large enterprises that need a solution such as Genway. Companies that have a very large customer base with hundreds of segments, different languages, different geos. But over time, we realized that we are actually getting inbound from smaller startups, smaller teams, smaller companies. And we realized that when you're the underdog, you need research even more than the market leader, because you need to be more agile. You need to build a better product. You need to fine-tune your product much better compared to the big players in that industry. And so there is definitely a need there as well that would help bridge that.
Yeah. Another thing that came up when you just talked is the option to research your competitors, of course. So if you're taking a competitor product, you could understand what are the downsides and where is the things that you need to develop in order to compete better with them.
Yeah. So the way Genway is currently being used by our customers, when we think about contextual interviews, so I think prototype testing is very straightforward, but when we think about contextual interviews, those can be used pre-production, in production, and post-production. And what do I mean by that? Pre-production means that even before you start developing something, you want to conduct some discovery interviews in order to get a better understanding of whether you should be going into the Japanese market. Should you be developing or localizing a certain feature for the German market, for example, right? So those are discovery interviews. Then we have in-production interviews. So for example, you have an onboarding experience through which you onboard new SMBs into your platform, and you want to understand what would help make that process much smoother for those SMBs, because you see on average that only maybe 70 or 80% of them complete the onboarding process. Or you see a certain variation in the time duration which it takes to complete that process. So you can deploy Genway in order to get that qualitative feedback from those SMBs and incorporate that. The third use case, which is post-production, what we call post-mortem, For example, churn interviews. If we think about the observability tools that exist in the industry, those observability tools, they will give you a sense of the situation, and they will show you that 20% of your US customers are churning on monthly basis, which is great. You get an understanding that there is a problem, but it does not give you the underlying context of why they're leaving. Are they leaving because your product offering is lousy? Are they leaving because there is a new competitor that kind of gives them a better pricing? Or are they leaving because they're just not happy with the solution? That can be only achieved by talking to those customers. And it goes back to our previous point that if I just churned from a product that you developed and we jump on a conversation about that, first of all, I'm not sure how likely I am to jump on a conversation with you to talk about the product that I just churned from to begin with.
Of course.
But then if I jump on that conversation, I'm not sure if I would even give you like the honest answer, because maybe it was a very lousy product and you're the lead product manager that developed it. And I don't want to share that with you because I'm not sure maybe 2 years down the line, I will be interviewing for a job with you.
Right. I think that what you said about at the beginning is like before production, when something is just very new, a new product, a new feature, a new startup, whatever. I think that in most cases, you're interested in knowing the market, as you mentioned, like, should I do it for the German market, as you said? And more than that, when I do decide to develop some kind of a feature or capabilities for my product, I want to make sure that I do it well and that it's needed as I understand that it's needed. In many cases, when I come, I come from design and UX. This is what I do most of my life. I do product and UX, for many years. And in many cases, you see that when something is developed, it's considered as something very precious. People are getting connected to their feature, like it's like a baby, and it's very hard for them to think about it together. And when I come to see a product after it's developed, it's very hard to take like a few steps back. When they're just thinking about it, even just having a few wireframes in the beginning, that's the best time to think about, is it needed? How do customers see it? Is it valuable? Will they pay for it? These are questions that are so important commercially for these, especially young startups.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. I think that you're touching on a very important point. And as someone who worked at Google for many years, I also saw it across different across different strategic decisions that were made. And maybe 4-6 weeks down the line, the leadership already understood that might not be the right direction. But it's too late to correct that in quarter because those targets are being set prior to the quarter, and those targets are somewhat similar to an air kind of carrier. Once the direction is set, it takes a lot of time to stop that ship from moving forward.
Right.
And so the more research you can do before launching something, the better it is. And when we think about it from a top level perspective, organizations are spending billions of dollars understanding their customers through data. Despite that, 3/4 of features and products are actually deprecated after launch.
3/4?
3/4. According to Harvard Business Review, 3/4 of features and products get deprecated post-launch because they do not cater to the needs of the customers.
That's a huge number it's a loss. It's just a loss of numbers of money.
It's insane. And what's important to understand that it's not only startups that get it wrong. It's large enterprises that get it wrong as well. And I'm not sure if you ever came across the website Killed by Google. But
yeah, I know. It's like a small cemetery of all the products that they killed, right?
Precisely. There are 300 products there. And we're not talking about features. We're talking about products that had VPs and product managers and leadership responsible for them. And eventually they got it wrong. So 3/4 of features and products are deprecated. And then if you talk to an R&D team lead, he will tell you that 50% of the team's time is actually spent on rework post-production after they already deployed something based on the kind of roadmap and based on the initial mock-ups and based on all the research that has been conducted or not conducted in that instance.
Yeah. I didn't know that this is the numbers. I thought it's much lower, I have to say. But let's think about what is the reason, and will user research would cover these reasons. Because in some cases, of course, if a feature is not needed, for sure. It's not needed, so don't develop it. Sometimes users think it's needed, but they're not willing to pay for it. So yeah, it's nice to have, not more than that. And the last thing is, yeah, they need it, they're willing to pay, they will pay for it, and then it's not delivering what was promised. Like there are so many steps and milestones on the way from the initial research and what we meant to do and the result, which could be very far away from what is promised in the beginning, from what we thought we would create. And then this discrepancy is the main reason, I guess. Do you have anything else in your mind?
I think it's a very good point, and you covered it all. I would say that research can definitely address all of those. The question is more on the process side of things. So you probably had a similar experience as a product manager. If you have a dedicated research team and you're conducting some kind of research for an upcoming feature that you're thinking about developing, one of the challenges those days in those fast-moving industries is that you need an answer yesterday. You don't need the answer in 4 to 8 weeks. You can't afford waiting 4 to 8 weeks because you have leadership kind of breathing down your neck that we need to launch those new features. And as a result, you do the best you can, you talk to a few users, you look at the data, you make a decision that those are the 3 features that will get prioritized this quarter. But in reality, you're just like shooting in the dark, so to speak, because you haven't actually had a chance to complete a comprehensive research. And so I definitely believe that research has the ability to tackle that and to reduce the amount of features and products that actually fail, helping companies build better products that cater to their customers. And that's kind of where AI-powered user research can be very helpful. When we think about research as a whole, there is fundamental research and then there is tactical research. Fundamental research would be done more on a strategic level, whether the company should go in a certain direction, whether the company should spend hundreds of millions investing into a specific kind of product development. And then you have tactical research. Should we maybe launch a certain feature for this segment of users? Should we invest time in kind of reshaping a certain experience? So there are many, both are equally important. And I believe that AI has the opportunity to allow research teams and product teams and insights generating functions to do more research and be more productive. So they can focus on the fundamental research and the AI can focus on more tactical things.
Yeah. Although if we are seeing the future, it seems that we will need more and more fast results, or technical, as you call it, and much less strategic view, because strategic is something that you see like 2 or 3 years from here, and it's so hard to anticipate. You see in many cases they bring on, McKinsey in order to do strategy research. In many cases, it's not that successful because it's very hard to imagine what would be or to anticipate what's going to be the future in this fast moving industry. And more than that, I think that if we're thinking about AI as a tool or products that will use or utilize AI, it's going to be very, very different. Right now, the products, you create a feature, so you know what should be the end result. Because if not, it's a bug, right? So, I'm pressing here, I'm going to this screen. This is what's supposed to be. In AI, you will get some kind of a very fluid conversation or result or experience that could be different for each of the users. So we have to change the way the method is working in order to anticipate what people are doing, because everyone will get a different result and a different answer in that case.
I agree. I think that over the last year or so, there has been a lot of discussions around whether AI is going to replace people. And if we think specifically about research, there has been a lot of debate about whether AI agents can potentially replace researchers. And my answer is most definitely no. If anything, AI agents and companies such as Genway can augment the way research is currently done so that it can be done at a higher velocity and provide more coverage. Just the other day, I was talking to a fellow co-founder, and his company employs 2 junior engineers. One of them fresh out of the university, the other one hasn't even had any kind of formal diploma. And the only reason they employ them or able to employ them is because those engineers are capable of using ChatGPT-alike tools such as Copilot, etc., in order to write code and develop. And so their net productivity is actually positive. And so they're able to provide a lot of value to the company, something that was not possible before. So for me, when I think about the changes that we see in software specifically and the pace with which those companies are moving and how AI is being deployed, I actually believe that it's going to increase the demand for research, if
Yeah.
nothing else.
Yeah, maybe you're right. I think that, I created a program in order to create generative AI products, help leaders create generative AI products. And you see that on one side, it's such a big potential. Everybody wants to use it. On the other side, it's a bit like risky because it's very new. So if you had a way to de-risk these projects using research in a way that would tell you, yeah, in this way it's a good way to this is feature or product that is needed, this is not needed, in here it's needed, for this market it's less needed, in this market the competitors are ruling the market from side to side, maybe you should go to another market, so forth. So just understanding users and customers and markets is so important in order to de-risk some of these products. And maybe then these companies, especially big ones which are more reluctant and hesitant, would be willing to go forward and do these kinds of things.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that the more we have seen that over the last, I would say, year or so, as things are always interconnected, right? And we see that the interest rates are increasing, and so money becomes more scarce and more expensive. And as a result, organizations are also scaling down on their teams. They no longer have the luxury of having this insane headcount. And so every bet they take needs to be more focused and more ROI positive than it was before. So if 5-10 years ago, you could bet on 10 different products and live just fine with one of them being successful. Today, that's no longer the case. And you need to be much more laser focused. And in order to be more laser focused, you need to better understand your customers.
Yeah. And of course, in order to do so, sometimes they say, okay, it's so expensive to have so many teams doing the research and all the analytics of these results of the research and so forth. It's like too much for us as a company to go to that direction. And especially if they're incumbents, very big companies, enterprise companies, they would say, okay, we're betting on the sure thing, on our current products. This is what we're going to do. This is what gave us money till now. We believe it's going to give us money. We hope. We don't know if believe is like, we hope it's going to work this way in the future. And then they stay more or less doing very small things for innovation and betting on their current strategy from now on, more or less.
Yeah, listen, I think that incumbents and large companies, it's a very sophisticated and complicated system of needs and wants. And at any given point, you need to satisfy the board, you need to satisfy the senior executives, you need to satisfy the employees, you need to satisfy the users. And as a result, they can take much smaller bets compared to what a growth stage company or a startup can take.
Yeah, that's true. And more than that, I think it's the way these big companies are built. Innovation is they want to do innovation, but they don't want to take all the risk involved with innovation, and they have a lot to lose, right? As you said, like their board, their stakeholders, so forth. So it's very risky for them. While if it's a new company or a small company or a growing company, this is the only way for them to win. So they don't have any other possibilities, especially if you're talking about startups. If you're not doing things better than the current ones, you have no way of winning in any case.
Absolutely. And that's how the ecosystem is structured, right? Because if those large enterprises were to take those big bets, then you will not have a flourishing startup ecosystem. The reality is that you have those startups trying to build some crazy ideas, and then those that are successful, the large enterprises would buy them as one kind of option. So I think it's a perfectly structured system. The enterprises are living in a certain segment, that they are the market leaders there potentially. They focus on sure bets. And then you have the startups that are trying to disrupt those businesses and build something so mind-blowing that the enterprise will notice it and decide to buy that company.
Although, I'm for the underdogs, and I always, we know many companies or startups that are doing these exits, right? they're
Yeah.
selling their technologies and knowledge to a bigger company. And for me, just knowing that some of them would grow and maybe in the future would be a real competition to these large companies, for me, it's much more hopeful than thinking about all these young minds in the end getting, getting the exit money and the big players getting bigger and bigger. And maybe it's just me, but I would prefer
There is
that they would have
definitely
competition.
There is definitely that argument, and I completely agree that an ecosystem in which you have competition is better compared to an ecosystem in which you do not have competition. I think that there are kind of pros and cons for selling a company. On the pro side, you can definitely you can think about the synergies that are kind of being achieved through that acquisition, and you can also think about the fact that when you have a successful company that got acquired, you have the founders as well as the first employees. Most often they will move to the larger company, they will spend a few years there, but then they will go back to entrepreneurship. And this kind of fuels the ecosystem, right? And this is why we see second time, third time, and fourth time founders that actually they went out there, they built one successful company, they took the money from that success and they started building another company. And then on top of that, they might also become angel investors or actually become investors themselves, and they will invest that money into other founders that can go ahead and build more companies. So it's never, I would say, it's always kind of the devil is in the details. And I would definitely say that competition is better than no competition. And there is always this sweet spot at kind of when should you sell a company, but
Yeah. So, what advice would you give to companies just starting to explore AI for user research?
what advice I would give companies that are exploring AI for user research? I think I'm not in a position to give advice, but the one thing I can say is you should ask yourself, they should ask themselves how success looks like for them. I know that sometimes you have stakeholders that are concerned about using AI to communicate with their customers, but I would argue that that's a very narrow way of looking at things. You should rather look at it holistically and ask yourself, would my users benefit from the ability to communicate with us through an AI system? When we think about COVID, right? Prior to COVID, many of our interactions would be face to face. So, for example, I would never call my family on Zoom or have a Google Meet kind of chat with my mom. I would just go there for over the weekend, meet her for dinner, and stay for a few days. But post COVID, it became very legitimate to jump on a conversation through Zoom with your family rather than being there physically, right? So it just created this new medium through which we can communicate. And the same thing goes for AI. Utilizing AI agents for user research is not about replacing the current methods. It's about augmenting the way we are currently conducting research, and it's about allowing new segments of your customers to participate and to proactively give you feedback.
Yeah. You know, that one thing that came to my mind about using AI or using a different way to communicate is I know someone who created a startup for mental health. And at the beginning, they said, okay, you need a therapist, you need someone to talk to, you can't be alone, and it needs to be in conversation, at least in phone conversations. And then they found out first that many of their users are young, and some of them are teenagers. And teenagers prefer to text. They don't want to call anyone. They don't want anyone to call them for sure. So they found that, especially for this specific market, which is growing, we have more and more of these young people getting to be in positions, getting into companies, being employees. They're not just, high schoolers right now. And just thinking about the fact that some of your users would probably prefer a different way of communication. Maybe it will be awkward for them, for someone who is a bit older, even much older than them, to ask them questions. So I think that the fact that currently this is the way that it's done doesn't mean anything about what is best for our customers or what do they prefer.
I would refer to it as the adoption curve. If we are to talk to drivers today and ask them if they prefer to drive their car or a self-driving car, most of the people would still say that they prefer to drive their own car. But in 5 to 10 years, we will see much larger segment of the population utilizing self-driving cars, autonomous vehicles, right? So the adoption curve is slow and it takes time. When we think about cloud technology, it took AWS more than 20 years to become kind of a table stake name for cloud providers, right? And for software companies to start using cloud. The same thing applies to AI. Conversational AI is here to stay. It's going to become, if not already, table stakes. And for some users and some companies, they will choose to adopt it sooner than others. And this is what kind of ultimately is going to define market leaders. It goes back to what I mentioned before. The only thing that differentiates between two companies today is how customer-centric those companies are and how well they cater to the needs of their specific customer base. And AI has the opportunity to allow us to do that not only better or not only, well, AI has the opportunity to allow us to do it much faster and at scale.
Yeah. Do you use yourself as a startup? Do you use your own product in order to get better insights on your market?
That's an excellent question. We are actually using the product day in and day out for usability studies in order to build a better UX experience for our users, for companies that are using Genway and for end users that are being interviewed by Genway. So we are using it not to communicate with our customers, but to conduct research, simply because as a startup, we have a limited customer base and we're still kind of at the stage where we can actually communicate with all of our customers on bi-weekly basis. But when we develop the products, we use Genway in order to collect qualitative feedback at scale and do it much faster.
Yeah. What are your hopes and predictions for the future of AI and its impact on how we design and create products?
To be completely honest, I think that throughout my lifetime, every single prediction I gave turned out to be wrong. So it's very difficult for me to make a prediction about anything. We are living at a such high-paced kind of period, and the velocity with which things are changing is just mind-blowing. My prediction is that AI would enable us to build more personalized products. I have spent a few years working in the marketing industry, and I have seen how basically data can be leveraged for a kind of precise targeting of users based on their intent signals, based on their affiliation, etc., and how personalized it can be. I believe that the same can be achieved in product using AI solutions. Meaning, if I'm colorblind and both of us have Spotify, my Spotify might not have green as the main kind of color, and your Spotify would, right? So that's just a very simple example to a personalization that can be achieved through AI.
Yeah. Okay, so I have a question I ask most of my guests. What is your number one tip for AI entrepreneurs?
My number one tip for AI entrepreneurs: don't be AI entrepreneurs. Be just entrepreneurs that generate value and use AI as the medium through which you generate that value. It's not about AI, it's about entrepreneurship. It's about generating value. And if you end up generating that value using AI, so be it.
Okay, thank you, Nathan, for your very interesting point of view. And it's been a pleasure talking to you. Where could people hear more about Genway and contact you?
Thank you for having me. If anyone wants to reach out, they can hit me up on LinkedIn. They can also reach out at Natan@genway.ai. And beyond that, it has been a phenomenal pleasure chatting to you. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for coming. It's been very insightful, and I hope that all our listeners will go and try your product and see how it goes. So, and lots of luck with it for sure. I'm always excited to have entrepreneurs here because I feel like the excitement, and I really hope that it will be successful. So, good luck to Genway too. And to all of you change makers out there, thank you for joining us. I invite you to sign up to my new online leaders program, Unlocking the Power of Generative AI, designed to equip leaders with the skills to build successful generative AI products, and I'll see you next week with another innovative, insightful talk. See ya. זהו. איך היה?
סבבה לגמרי.
כן.
זה פחות מלחיץ ממה שחשבתי. בדרך כלל זאת אומרת כשזה כזה פייס טו פייס, אז זה ממש סבבה. וובינרים וכאלה, האמת היא שאני לא עושה הרבה, אז זה היה מאוד מרענן.
כן, אני חושבת שהיה זורם, וכאן דיברנו על ג'נווי, אבל לא דיברנו כזה רק על זה, ודיברנו כזה מעבר, וזה נראה.
אוקיי, אין שום בעיה. אני משאיר ככה את הטאב. תודה רבה לך.